Okay, I hope everyone is doing well. It's amazing. We had this amazing snowstorm and then it was all gone.
Mhm.
It looks like
Yeah,
we're
it
gonna.
was an amazing snowstorm.
Yeah, well, my sister in New Jersey is like 2 feet under snow. She's not going anywhere anytime soon, but we got a nice little teaser.
Mm.
Okay, so we are in Parshat Tetzaveh, and it's also the Shabbos Zachor, where we read about the attack that Amalek perpetuated against the Jewish people in the desert, and our commandment, our mitzvah, to remember what Amalek did and to eradicate their memory. It's a mitzvah deoraita. It's a biblically based commandment to hear Parshat Amalek read once a year. So everyone is certainly encouraged to come to Shul this Shabbos to fulfill that requirement. If for whatever reason you can't make it to Shul, we can talk about other ways that that mitzvah can be fulfilled. Um, and of course, Purim is next week. Next Monday night is Purim. In case it wasn't obvious, our Parsha Shir will not meet next week as we will be maybe still, those that are coming to the Shul Su'uda, maybe we'll still be there. Depends how raucous it gets, but some of us might be recovering from whatever Purim festivities we have, and we'll resume in 2 weeks. Um,
Oh,
Hey Arthur,
hi.
how are you?
Hi, everybody. I'm
Hi,
fine.
Hi,
we're
Arthur.
we're just getting started. Um,
Good.
so Parshat Tit
Yeah,
Hi Ann. Parshat Tetzaveh almost always coincides with the Shabbos Zachor, with the Shabbos before Purim, or very often it does. And so there's all sorts of connections that are made between the Parsha and Purim, and we'll explore one of those connections tonight. The main thrust, the main theme of Parshat Tetzaveh is the Big Day Kahuna, the priestly garments, the special begadim, the special clothing that the Kohen Gadol was instructed to wear. And the parsha goes into great detail into what those garments are and how they were made and how they were to be worn. That's the major focus of the parsha. There's some other Mishkan stuff going on as well, but that's really the focus. Let's just ground ourselves in what the Torah tells us to introduce all of this. It's actually, we begin with Atat Tetzaveh, the mitzvah to light the menorah. So last week in our shir, we spoke about the mitzvah to build the menorah. Parshat Tetzaveh actually has the commandment to light the menorah. And so it's interesting why those, the construction and the lighting are separated, but that's for a different discussion, for a different shir, for a different year. And then we transition into the following. Chapter 28. V'ata hakriv elecha et Aaron achicha ve'banav ito mitoch bnei Yisrael l'chahano li Aharon Nadav ve'avihu Elazar v'Tamar bnei Aharon. And you shall bring near to you Aaron your brother and his children from amongst the children of Israel to serve me as a priest. Aaron, Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Itamar, his children. Yasita bigdei kodesh la'aron achicha lechavod u'letifaret. You shall make holy clothing for Aaron your brother, lechavod u'letifaret, which is translated here as for dignity and adornment. V'ata tidaber el kol chachmei leiv asher miletiv ruach chachma. V'yasu et bigdei Aaron lekacho lechanoli. You should speak to all the wise-hearted people whom I filled with the spirit of wisdom, and they should make the clothing for Aaron to sanctify him to serve as a priest. These are the clothing that they should make. Choshen ve'efod u'me'il u'chetonet hashbeit mitznefet ve'avnet ve'asu bigdei kodesh la'aron achicha u'levanav lechahanoli. So the clothing are a breastplate and a ephod. I think one year we spoke about the ephod. Many people translate it as sort of an apron that went underneath. A robe, a fringed tunic, a headdress, and a sash. You shall make those for Aaron as holy garments for Aaron and his sons to serve as priests for me. והם ייקחו את הזהב ואת התכלת ואת הגרמן ואת תולת השני ואת השש. And they shall take, or they will use in making these clothing, gold, blue, purple, crimson yarns, and fine linen. Okay, so we have this mitzvah that we have that there you have to create the special bigadim, the special clothing for Aharon and his sons to serve as Kohanim. It's interesting just at the very get-go, right? That asu bigdei kodesh, they should make holy clothing. The term for clothing, bigadim, has another use in Hebrew, which we see in source number 2. I should show you source number 2 and not just right? Ashamnu, when we say the vidui, when we say the confession on Yom Kippur in our davening, say Ashamnu bagadnu. We have betrayed. We have
what is it? Proving is in the emergency. What? I have no idea.
We have betrayed. Leave goad. Begida is betrayal. Right. So it's interesting that the same term beged, which means clothing, also means betrayal. Rabbi Sachs focuses on this theme a lot in his writings on the Parsha. And he says, right, if we look especially in Sefer Breshit, that clothing is often used as a form of betrayal in one way or another. Anyone think of examples where clothing might be used for betrayal?
Adam and Chava.
Okay.
Right?
How is clothing a betrayal for them?
Well, all of a sudden they're wearing clothing, and they said, and Hashem says, "How do you know you were naked?" And that revealed that they ate.
Okay, so the clothing is the indication that they had done something wrong.
The ultimate betrayal. That's right.
Yeah. Any other examples that come to mind? Okay, so when Yaakov tricks Yitzchak, tricks his father into giving him the bracha, he disguises himself as Esav. He disguises himself, he puts on the clothing of Esav, and Yitzchak notices the contradiction, that it seems to be the voice or the language or the demeanor of Yaakov, but it certainly is the physical appearance, feeling, sense of Esav.
And also, Yosef's brothers brought his coat back to their father after dipping it in goat's blood to fake his death.
Yeah, all right. Hakerna, what's the word? Haketonib, Haketonib bin Chazeh. Is this right? They dip the coat in blood and they say to him, "Recognize, please, is this your son's coat?" So right, so the clothing, right, especially right, in Sefer Breshit has this element of indicating the dual meaning of the word. It is clothing, right? It doesn't leave the pshat, but it also has this element of betrayal or being used for deceit, which is quite interesting.
Wasn't there something with Potiphar's daughters? She did something to indict.
Well, it says that when she was trying to seduce Potiphar's wife.
His wife?
Right, when she was trying to seduce Yosef, right, it says that he left his clothing in her hands and he ran outside. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's a betrayal. So, I mean, he's betraying her maybe, but that's a good thing, right? But yeah, clothing figures there also.
Clothing would be something which gives a false impression superficially.
Yeah, and that actually leads us nicely into the next source, which is raises the question: is why is there such a focus on the clothing? Right? Why do we care so much what the Kohen wears in the service in the Mishkan? Right? Is just one of many examples. So we have a pasuk from Shmuel Aleph. Vayomer Hashem el Shmuel, al tabit el mer'ehu, El Gavoa Komato. Don't look at his appearance or his stature, his height. This is talking about Shaul. We know that Shaul was exceedingly tall. Ki me'astihu, because I, God says, have rejected him. Lo asher yireh adam ki adam yireh le'inayim. Right? Not as humans see, right? Humans see what is visible. But Hashem yireh la'levav. Humans see what is visible, and God sees the heart. Right? We're supposed to be concerned. We're supposed to try to be like God. We're supposed to be focused on matters of the heart. So why is there this focus on the clothing, on the externality, on the
They say
physicality?
there's a saying, "Al tistakel b'kankan ela b'ma sheyesh bo."
Yeah,
Don't just look at the container or the wrapping. What's inside? That is what is in the person, the actual reality, as opposed to what is presented with gift wrapping.
yeah, exactly. So, right, it begs the question, right? And we can expand it, right? I mean, so our parsha is focused primarily on the clothing, but the entire Mishkan, right, has this focus on the physicality and the appearance of all the different vessels, all the different kalim, and why, what it looked like. And we can ask again, why is there such a concern, right? Precise measurements and the beauty. Um, it doesn't seem like that's the focus or what we should be focused on. It seems to be kind of counter to where our intention and our hearts should be. It's a little bit of a klutzkasher. I mean, like, yeah, we all get it that the real essence is the internality, but that there is a reason and a purpose and value in physical appearance. But again, it seems like perhaps there's been a little bit of a strong emphasis on it here, perhaps more than we would expect. I'm going to skip to source number 7, which is the Malbim. And the Malbim says as follows. Vyasita bigdei kodesh, right? So Hashem's commandment to Moshe, you should make holy clothing. Hineha begadim shetziva lasot, haya kefi hagilui begadim chitzonim. So he says, right, these clothes are external clothing, physical. Sheyisaper inyanam eichasuotam ha'umanim b'melacha, and it tells what they looked like and how they were made by the artisans. Aval be'emet hayu morim al bigadim pnimiyim sheyasu kohanei Hashem v'albish bam et nafshoteim. But really, these external physical clothes are supposed to allude or point to the internal clothing, which the God's priests would use to adorn or to dress their souls. B'deot uv'midot uv'tchunot tovot shehem mabushei hanefesh, with proper opinions and proper character traits, which are the clothing of the soul. Umabushim eile lo asu ha'umanim. The artisans did not make these internal spiritual clothing. V'tziva Hashem el Moshe shu yaseh bigdei kodesh eile. So God told Moshe that he, Moshe, should make these holy, internal, spiritual clothing. Hainu lilamdam tikun nafshotehem umidotehem be'ofen she'albishu hod v'hadar et nafsham hapnimit, which is to say that Moshe should teach the Kohanim how to fix, how to train their souls and their character traits in such a way that they will be wearing splendor and glory on their inner souls. I don't know what this means on a simple level. I don't know, if I had to translate this and describe this to a kindergartner, I don't know how I would do it. But I think we all get the point that the Malbim is trying to make, is that somehow these external physical clothing are supposed to have an impact on the Kohanim's spiritual being, and that's the real focus. Again, how it does that, how I'm sure he could point to every detail and every beged, every clothing, every piece of clothing that the Kohen wore must lead to some different character trait, some different element of one's spiritual existence that requires training and perfection. And any questions or thoughts on that? It's a little bit vague, but again, I think the point is, the general point I think is clear. Okay, so let's go back to source number Oh, I didn't number this one. It should be source number 4, the Sefer HaChinuch, which means every other source is going to be misnumbered by 1. So remember, the Sefer HaChinuch always gives us the Misharshei HaMitzvah, the reason for the mitzvah, the explanation for it. So the Sefer HaChinuch explains as follows. Misharshei HaMitzvah, the reason for this mitzvah of making the clothing for the Kohanim, Hayesod HaKavua lanu ki Adam nif'al lefi pu'ulatav. Right, and this is a theme that repeats itself over and over again in the Sefer HaChinuch, that man is impacted by his actions, v'acharei machshvotav v'kavanotav, and by his thoughts and his intentions. V'hashaliach hamechaper, so the agent for the people who is bringing about atonement for them, sarich lahatpis kol machshvotav v'kavanato el ha'avoda, must focus all of his thoughts and all of his intention to the service at hand. Al kain ra'ui lobosh begadim miyuchadim eleha. Therefore, he must wear clothing that is specially designated for this service. Shekesheyistakel b'chol makom shebegufo miyad yeniskar v'misover b'libo lifnei mihu oved. That when he looks all over at, looks at himself, looks at what he's wearing, looks at his appearance, he will immediately remember and be awakened in his heart about before whom he is standing.
Is anybody else getting a very, very bad audio?
No.
It's like all staticky and very hard to understand and so on. Nobody else has a problem?
No one else. Huh. Maybe try dialing it on your phone, Arthur. Maybe you'll get a better reception that way. Okay. So when the Kohen looks at this at the clothing, he will be reminded about the fact that he is standing in service of God. He says a similar thing is achieved when we put on tefillin. And even though the Kohen also wore tefillin, that wasn't enough because he had such a monumental task that he had to have extra reminders. Okay, so the Sefer HaChinuch tells us that the reason for these clothing is to help the Kohen have proper kavanah. Right, and you can think about, actually, I'll hold off on that for a second. So he says, yeah, of course, right, again, agreeing with the Malbim, agreeing with what we said, that really it's about the inner intentionality, the inner traits that the Kohen's supposed to have, but that these physical clothes help him to get to that proper state, help him to have the right kavanah when he's serving in the Mishkan. In source number 4, we have the Rambam from the Mor Nevuchim, from the Guide for the Perplexed. And the Rambam says as follows: in order to raise the estimation of the temple, those who ministered therein received a great honor, and the priests and the Levites were therefore distinguished from the rest. It was commanded that the priests should be clothed properly with beautiful and good garments, holy garments for glory and for beauty. A priest that had a blemish was not allowed to officiate. Not only those that had a blemish were excluded from the service, but also, according to Talmudic interpretation of this precept, those who had an abnormal appearance. For the multitude does not estimate man by his true form, but by the perfection of his bodily limbs and the beauty of his garments, and the temple was to be held in great reverence by all. What does the Rambam say different? What's the purpose of the clothing for the Rambam?
So that people would hold him in reverence.
So that people would hold the Kohen in reverence. So for the Sefer HaChinuch, the focus is on the Kohen. We want the Kohen to have proper kavanah. The Rambam says the focus is really on the tzibor, is on the congregation, is on the masses that are assembled, that they should have proper respect and mindset when they're in the Mishkan observing, participating, whatever it is that they're doing, the focus is on the tzibor, is on the masses, and it's not necessarily that we need the Kohanim to have this extra kavana. I mean, he might agree that it helps the Kohanim as well, but right, clearly for the Rambam, the focus is on the rest of the nation and not specifically on the Kohanim.
If we think about the reference that Bnei Yisrael had prior to Yetziat Mitzrayim, it was the Egyptians. And the higher up in the Egyptian culture, at least according to the movies and maybe the hieroglyphics, they were more adorned, right? Physicality was a virtue in Egyptian culture. So in order to help Bnei Yisrael transition from a physical nature to a spiritual nature, they had to have some things that they were accustomed to. So that's the way I would understand what the Rambam is saying.
Okay, so it's like I have some plants in the audience this week, because that's the second perfect transition from one source to the next source that's coming. So thank you, Aaron, and we'll mention it now. You know, for the Rambam, that is a common theme, right? That's how he explains the fact that we begin, with this, with the emphasis on korbanos, on sacrifices. But the Rambam says that really the ideal is to pour out one's heart to God, but that the method of worship that was so prevalent at the time was sacrifices, that had God said, forget sacrifices and just pray in this new radical way that no one else in the world does, that would have been too much. And so he says that Hashem gave us korbanos, but eventually set up the system that we would transition to an emphasis on tefillah, which was true even when, right, eventually was true, even though we were still giving korbanos, even when the Beis Hamikdash was still standing, the emphasis switched. And so Rabbi Sachs says in source number 5 that that's a similar thing to what's going on here. Why was it that specifically in relation to the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash, the visual prevailed? The answer is deeply connected to the golden calf. What that sin showed is that the people could not fully relate to God, who gave them no permanent and visible sign of his presence, and who could only be communicated with by the greatest of prophets. The Torah was given to ordinary human beings, not angels or unique individuals like Moshe. It is hard to believe in a God of everywhere in general, but nowhere in particular. It is hard to sustain a relationship with God who is only evident in miracles and unique events, but not in everyday life. It is hard to relate to God when he only manifests himself as overwhelming power. So Rabbi Sachs says, right, and again, there's a huge machlokes about when the mitzvah to construct the Mishkan was given. Was it given before Chet HaEgel or after Chet HaEgel? Before the sin of the golden calf or after the sin of the golden calf? Right, the Rabbi Sachs here is clearly assuming that it was given after the sin of the golden calf, as a means to atone for that horrible sin. It says that part of the sin, and God realized that maybe he was asking too much or moving too quickly with Bnei Israel, that they needed some sort of physical things to latch onto. And so, right, it's not an idol, it's nothing like the golden calf, but that there is such a focus on the aesthetic and the physicality and the externality in the Mishkan, perhaps was as a concession or a recognition of the fact that Bnei Israel needed that in order to move towards a more proper worship of Hashem. So, Aaron, that was a great transition point. And then I'll just share what Rabbi Linzer has to say on this. Right, he says that there's actually quite an irony. The beauty of the Mishkan impressed the people with a grandeur and majesty befitting a house of God, and instilled in them the proper sense of awe in their relationship to God. The paradox is that once one internalizes this awe and understands how elevated, how infinitely different God is from the physical world, One should be propelled to be more like God and should not be swayed by externals or shows of wealth, not but by things of true value, character, commitment, righteousness, and kindness. The opulence of the Mishkan, like the very phenomenon of any physical place for God, was necessary to reach the people where they were, so that they could be elevated to where they needed to be. And somehow it had to accomplish this without reinforcing the values it was working to move people from. Right, again, right, but very much that there's sort of this recognition that even though it's perhaps not ideal, people are people, and as such, we need to, the Torah is sensitive and Hashem is careful to give things over in a way that people will be able to relate to in our imperfect human selves. And so, at least at that point in history, and I wonder what the ideal form, what form would be given if we were given these rules afresh in our day and age. But in that time, people needed something physical. They needed something,
For supper, she
something
asked for
with,
the bigger holding pantry, so I sent her the
it's given us this sort of less than ideal form in order to wean us off of it. But that we had to start perhaps lower down than where we should have. Any questions or reactions to what we've seen so far?
As people become increasingly ingrained with recognition of what is authentically to be venerated, valued, the internalities that are not necessarily visible and like clothing, does that mean we become less concerned about the appearance? We have this strange thing about what is it? The clothing makes the man, or the garment makes the man.
Yeah.
That someone becomes very focused. There are Streimelach that sell for many thousands of dollars that some people buy because they want to be able to serve in suitably prepared in a way to inspire or to express, or a silken
Yeah.
dartle, or how
So
many?
so all these all these positions that say that this is recognizing a less than ideal human condition, right, leads to an interesting question about, is there ever a point where we don't need this anymore, right? Would there ever be a point where there wouldn't be such a emphasis? You could always say, well, there's going to be someone that needs to start at step one. So right, so even if um, for the Bali Tshuva, for the people that aren't connected yet. So maybe that will always be a reality, and we always want to have a sensitivity to people that aren't as quote developed or refined as we think they should be, or that we think they are. But if this is in fact true and correct, so that it raises the question about would the rules ever change? Um, and it leads to really interesting questions about the role of sort of these externalities in our day and age. So again, I don't think anyone would deny that it's proper to go to shul dressed nicely and dressed respectfully and dressed in a way that will make you feel good about yourself and feel like you're important, and also will not distract people that are around you. And I forget what number you threw out for the Strymel. $10,000 Strymel, does that distract or does that enhance? I don't know. I don't know
But
the
that
answer to that.
extends to Shaitlach,
Yeah,
for
Shaitlach and to
example.
suits and to watches and to we can all find the thing that will do it for us. And so it's not an easy it's not easy to find the ideal, but it is interesting to think about this sort of compromise that's being built in, or this recognition
What
of the human
about the
condition.
Nazir?
What about the
I'm sorry.
Nazir?
Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt. What about the Nazir is on the other side of this scale?
right.
Perhaps the most spiritual element described in Chumash, right? Who eschews all of these physical aspects, right?
Right.
That's not an important element. I mean, if we're looking for an example of where can you get to,
Well, we could take
on
it
one
both
level,
ways
then that's
because the Nazir brings a chatat, he brings a sin offering at the end of his Nazirut. So some say that chatat is because
true.
he's stopping to be a Nazir, and once he reaches that, once he's dedicated himself, he should never resort back to being a quote normal person. But others say that no, it's because he was living in this elevated state and was denying himself pleasures or interactions with the physical world. So it's an interesting question, but I
But
think we can explain it away if we want to.
yeah, no, I agreed. But at least on its surface, it certainly puts a balance on the other side of the equation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I don't have a definitive answer to this, but I think it's an interesting thing to think about. One more source before we transition to some Purim Torah, not in the comical sense, but Torah related to Purim. So one interesting midrash that Rav Amital brings down. Midrash says as follows: Right, Hashem tells Moshe, "Ata hakrev elecha." You should bring close to you Aaron and his sons in order to make them into Kohanim. And so the Medrash is asking, why is it specifically emphasizing Ata, you Moshe should do this? Hadahu dichtiv, and it says that this is in line with the verse from Tehillim, which Shlomo Korbach turns into a beautiful song. Bulei Toratcha shashuai azavadati be'oni. If not for the fact that your Torah was my delight or my plaything, then I would be lost in my poverty. Kishamar Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe V'ata hakrev elecha heiralo. When God told Moshe, you should bring close to you, heiralo, this was bad. Moshe didn't like this. This didn't sit well with Moshe. Amarlo, Torah hayatali unatati alecha she'ilulehi ibadati olami. And he says, I had the Torah and I gave it to you, and if not for that, my world would be lost. In other words, right? Moshe is upset that he thought he was going to be the Kohen Gadol. Moshe thought that he was going to be the one to serve in this role. And now that I have to give it away, I have to give it to my brother Aaron, then it feels that my world is lost. Mashal chacham shnatal krovotav asta imo eser shanim velo yalda. Right, it's similar to a chacham, a sage, a person, a man who gets married and is married for 10 years and does not succeed in having children. Amarla b'kshili isha. So he so the Hebrew is a little bit strange, right? But right, so the halacha is if after a certain number of years, right, 10 years, if a couple doesn't have children, then the husband should, is allowed to take another wife. Right, so say basically this husband is in a dilemma because he greatly loves his wife, but they haven't had children, and now he needs to ask permission. He's not sure what to do. He doesn't want to take another wife, so it feels like all is lost. So this is similar to what God said to Moshe. I could have made you, I could have made Aaron the Kohen without consulting you, without any of your input. But here I'm doing you a favor because I'm involving you in the process. Even though ultimately, Moshe, this isn't what you want. You want for yourself to be the Kohen Gadol, but at least you're involved in the process. Okay, I don't think I translated that very well, but you get the gist of what the Medrash is saying.
Mm-hmm.
So Rav Amital asks the question. He says, "Why is Moshe so bothered? Why is Moshe so intent, according to this medrash, on being the Kohen Gadol? You know, he's already Moshe Rabbeinu. He already receives the Torah. He's the greatest teacher, the greatest judge, the greatest leader. Why does he need to be a Kohen Gadol as well? Right? It seems like he's asking for too much. So if Amital says, I'm going to skip down a little bit, Moshe was concerned that if the two positions were split, the position of teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu, and the position of Kohen, if the two positions were split between different people, these two aspects of divine service would diverge, with people drawing the conclusion that they are irreconcilable. Accordingly, God came to Moshe to ask his permission for taking Aaron as the Kohen Gadol. Right? Yeah, we need a teacher and we need a Kohen Gadol. But if those are from the start two different people with two different approaches, two different styles, you know, there's a danger that you might see that the two strands can't ever come together. So that's what Moshe was concerned about. It wasn't that he needed the personal glory of being the Kohen Gadol. It was that he was concerned that it would lead to a misunderstanding of Torah, a misperception of what Torah is. Rav Amital continues, I believe this is significant on another level. The fashioning of the priestly vestments is another activity that will not be performed by Moshe himself. When the Torah introduces the fashioning of the vestments, it immediately explains their purpose for glory and splendor. The Kohen needs glorious vestments to perform the service in the Mishkan. One could ask, why is this necessary? Is not an emphasis on outward appearance of the superficial exterior? It seems that for this reason, Moshe himself could neither wear nor design the priestly vestments. Moshe, given his lofty spirituality, garments were of no significance. He did not need the priestly vestments to achieve the level of glory and splendor. However, God recognized that other people are not on the same level as Moshe. They would need the external expression of glory and splendor in order to properly appreciate what the divine service symbolizes. Accordingly, God selected Aaron to be the one to wear the priestly vestments. Moshe was already too advanced. Moshe was beyond where the rest of the people were. Moshe didn't need the physical embodiment, the physical beauty, splendor of the begadim, of the clothing, and he couldn't relate to the need for it. And so specifically Aaron had to be the Kohen Gadol because the Kohen was someone who was able to better relate to the rest of the people. That's what Rav Amital says. Yeah, really, and as support for this position, he brings a really interesting Gemara in Avodah Zarah. The Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva ikla leGinzik. Rabbi Akiva comes to the town of Ginzak or Ginzik. Ba'omine. They asked from him a number of questions that he did not know the answers to. Mitani l'sha'ot or in mitani l'sha'ot. If someone knows that they're not going to be able to complete a fast day, right? You're a soldier going into the front lines at 12 noon on Yom Kippur. Should you fast for the first half of the day, or knowing that you're not going to fast the entire day, already it's lost? Rabbi Akiva doesn't know the answer. Kankanim shel goyim asurim or mutarim. Jars that belong to non-Jews, right? Can they be used or not used? Are they puzzle or not? Here's our question. What did Moshe, right? So there's a tradition that during the Yemei Miluim, the days of the dedication of the Mishkan, for those 7 days, Moshe himself did all of the avoda, did all the service of the Mishkan. So they ask, which clothing did Moshe wear during the 7 days of Miluim? Did he wear the special clothing of the Kohen Gadol or did he not? Rabbi Akiva doesn't know the answer to any of these questions. Ata sha'il be'midrasha. So when he goes to the base medrash of Ginzak and he asks there, and they give answers to all the questions that he didn't know, and to the question about which clothing did Moshe wear during the 7 days of Miluim, the answer b'chaluk lavan. he wore white clothing. He wore the clothing of a regular Kohen, not the special Kohen, not the special clothing of the Kohen Gadol. So if Amital says this is proof that Moshe didn't need whatever external benefit the clothing offered, Moshe didn't need it. He could achieve the highest spiritual level without the prompt of the special
Are you supposed to pick up Elisha
Kohanim.
and Jerry?
No, they have a bride already, and the latest is that it's been postponed to 9:30.
Okay.
Oh, has she come at 9:30?
Rabbi,
Yes.
Yeah, you and Joshua.
Rabbi, on
Yes.
Yom Kippur, for the
On-
Avodah service,
Right.
did the Kohen Gadol wore Lavan?
He was
didn't wear.
he was changing in and out
chokshah.
of the special clothing all day long, but for the special service of Yom Kippur, correct, he wore the Lavan.
Without the chosha and without the
Correct.
all of the jewelry, which speaks to the point you're making, which is the ultimate level of kedusha is when you wear white.
Yeah.
You don't need the external accoutrements. You know, this parsha of Tetzaveh is the only parsha where Moshe is not speaking that his name is not mentioned.
Correct.
Right? Like Re'eh and Hazinu, Moshe is speaking, so we don't hear his name. But Tetzaveh, Moshe's name isn't here.
Right, and there's all sorts
parsha.
of beautiful explanations for why that is the case. But yes, but right. So this supports what you say, Aaron. Supports the idea that these begadim, these clothing, are.
I can hear that the sound is getting muddled.
Yeah, I do hear the echo now. I'm not sure who it's coming from. All right, we'll try to work through it. But right, so this supports the idea that we've seen by many of the commentaries that the clothing is sort of a concession to weakness of human condition, and that if we're able to go beyond that, then it's not necessary, maybe even ideal. And so when Moshe was serving as the Kohen Gadol, he didn't need it, and when we were right, presumably, if there's any day of the year where people would be at the spiritual level we want them to be at, it would be Yom Kippur. And in the middle of Yom Kippur, right, that there already was some service done with the full garb. That that supports that lends support to what we've said. Okay, I said that there's a Purim connection. So what does any of this have to do with Purim?
Special garments for Mordechai.
Okay, special garments for Mordechai.
Clothing, costumes that we wear on Purim.
Yeah, so I was thinking in general, right? The idea that we have this idea of costumes, of wearing costumes. So there's there's all sorts of explanations. We don't need to. We're not going to go into, certainly not with sources for all of them. But why do you what reasons have you heard that why we wear costumes?
So we can be joyous.
Okay, costumes bring joy. Say a little bit more about that, Cheryl. How does wearing a costume make us bring joy?
I mean, it takes us out of our normal dress. We pretend to be someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I could pretend to be Queen Esther. I'm obviously not a queen. And even people can dress in, I guess a man can dress in Beged Isha if he wants to on Purim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it brings joy, and maybe part of the joy might be just sort of the fun, the fact that this is something different, the fact that we're maybe a little bit less inhibited than we are, and there's other elements of Purim that play into that as well. But yeah, it's simcha, it's joy, it's fun. What else have we heard?
The Kohen's garments included pamon v'rimon.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was that before the Kohen Gadol entered the Kodesh HaKodashim, the bells ringing were a sign of Derech Eretz, letting the Kadosh Baruch Hu know that he was coming. And the parallel structure in Megillat Esther is her concern and her approach to Achashverosh at that time, worrying to make sure that she wouldn't surprise him, that he would be ready for her when she came for the audience.
So you're a holier person than I am, because when you started, I thought you were going to say that the Pamon V'Rimon, the bells are like sort of like the groggers that we shake in shul. But
oh no, sorry.
no, what you said is much better. So that the Kohen would sort of would have these natural bells built into his garment, so that both it would be a wake-up call and sort of a I'm coming, a knock on the door, for himself, for Hashem, and for whoever else might have been found in the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash, similar to how Esther had to announce herself and be accepted by Achashverosh before she could invite him to the party and ultimately plead her case. So Anne, you mentioned that Mordechai wears the royal clothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look beginning in number 14 on our sheet, so we have a number of instances in the Megillah where there's an emphasis on clothing, right? Not necessarily costumes, but when Haman's decree is issued, it says Mordechai yadat kol asher na'asa vayikra Mordechai et bigadav vayobash sak va'efer. Right, when Mordechai hears of Haman's decree, he tears his clothing and he wears sackcloth. And Esther sends to try to get him to change to wear something more respectful, but he refuses. Right? When Esther goes to ask the Achashverosh to come to the party to plead for her life, it says Vatilbash Esther Malchut. She wore royalty, right? She wore her royal dress. But again, the clothing. Of course, there's what you first mentioned with Mordechai being dressed in Achashverosh's clothing when Haman, Achashverosh asks Haman, how do you honor someone that did good for the king? Haman assumes it's talking about him. He says, dress him up just like the king in the king's clothing. And that's what he has to do to Mordechai. And then at the end of the story, when salvation comes, when the Jews get their revenge, Mordechai yatzami lifnei hamelech v'yavush malchut techelet b'chor v'ater zahav gedolah. Right, Mordechai leaves from the king wearing royal clothing. Right, becomes his normal clothing. Okay, so one interesting thing. Back to sort of what Cheryl was saying, is that the Shulchan Aruch tells us, the Ramah, right, the Ramah says, Ma shenahagulu bosh partsufim bepurim. So the custom that we have to wear costumes on Purim, v'gever lovesh simlat isha, v'isha kli gever, and that men dress as women and women dress as men. Ein isor badavar. There is no prohibition, even though normally there is a prohibition. Right? A man can't dress like a woman, woman can't dress like a man. That's forbidden from the Torah. But there is no prohibition. Me'achar she'ein mechavnin ela l'simcha be'alma. Since they're only doing this to have simcha, to have joy. V'chein, and here's a Purim costume I've never seen before. Levishtat kilayim dirabanan. Some people have a minhag, at least in the days of the Ramah, to wear kilayim, woolen linen, but not biblically prohibited kilayim, only rabbinically prohibited kilayim. So what exactly that means is for a whole other time. But some people would wear these questionable garments that you wouldn't otherwise wear. And I think it's interesting also that the Rambam tells us in source number 13, right, defining the general mitzvah of Aaron. I think the echo might be coming from you. I'm just going to put you on mute, and if you want to comment, unmute yourself. Okay. So when the Rambam describes the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov, the mitzvah of rejoicing on Yom Tov, he says that it's very physical. Chayav adam liot behen sameach b'tov leiv, hu banav v'ishto b'nei beito. Person should be happy, rejoice on Yom Tov, his entire household. Even as it says in the Torah, "V'samachta b'chagecha," rejoicing your holiday. Af al pisha simcha murakan hi korban shlamim. Even though technically this refers to a special sacrifice that was brought on the holidays. K'mo she'anu mivarim b'hilchot chagiga. Yesh bichlal ota simcha lismoach uvanav v'bnei beito kol echad karui lo. Included in this is to have other forms of simcha, of joy. Ketzad. What does this mean? Haketanim notein lahem klayot ve'gozimu migdanot. You give children clothing or special treats. Hanashim koneh lahem begadim b'tachshitim na'im. For women, you buy clothing and jewelry. Right? Is this a sexist Rambam? Is this not a sexist Rambam? Can you fulfill it if your wife, if a woman in your house doesn't get joy from clothing but gets joy from something else? Presumably, yes. And men should eat meat and drink wine because that's what makes men happy, right? That's very manly. But that the simcha is a very physical manifestation. But then he goes on and he says that you have to include the poor people in your celebration as well. And if all you do is eat and rejoice, without having proper kavana, so then that's not the proper. Simply, you have to find the right balance. But there is this very physical element of simcha. One final source I wanted to share with you, and this is from the Ishbitzer, the Mei HaShiloach. So he begins by commenting on the well-known halacha chayav inish lipsumi b'paraya adelo yada. Right, that a person has to get drunk on Purim so they don't know the difference between Haman's curse and Mordechai's blessing. Ad lo yada, hainu lashon dat vehekera, va'ayin. Right, ad, the phrase until one does not know, that implies knowledge and recognition, which is done with one's eyes. Ach bina hu balev, but to understand, to discern, that's a matter of the heart. Davar she'ein bo tfisa le'inayim, something which the eyes, which has no physical sensation or manifestation. Rak habina shebalev mamshich l'shorsho. Only understanding in the heart really connects you to the root of the matter. Upor hu lashon goral hamoreh lebina. I don't understand this next piece, but poor, the lot that Haman drew, somehow indicates bina, somehow indicates this discerning of the heart. V'zeu chayav adam, and this is the meaning of that a person must drink so much on Purim. Ad lo yada, hainu b'li da'at behakera. Right? So it says you have to drink so that ad lo yada, so that you do not know through the physical perception, through the seeing, through the perceiving with one's eyes, with one's body, the difference. Rak mehabina shebali, but that you have to get to a point where you discern it, you understand the difference, you're seeing the difference only through your hearts, only through this more intellectual, deeper level. Our Haman ubarach Mordechai, that Haman is cursed and Mordechai is blessed. And this is why we wear costumes on Purim. More she'af beli hakara al halevush. It teaches that even without physical recognition of one's clothing, Yiru kol amei aretz ki shem Hashem nikra aleinu, that all the world will see that God's name is declared upon us. Meaning what? Meaning that we wear costumes because normally, if a person is identified by how they dress, how they identify themselves, the point on Purim is that we should so much internalize our Jewish pride and what it means to be a Jew, and how we connect and how we relate to Baruch Mordechai, the idea that Mordechai is blessed, that even without our normal physical appearance, people can get that sense from us. Okay, so we have to really, really internalize, and through internalizing it, it will spill out to the rest of the world. I thought was a very beautiful, deep insight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so again, there's a lot to say about the practice of dressing up on Purim, right? That everything in the Megillah is kind of not as it appears to be. We have to go beyond the surface level of things. There's a lot to say, but as far as just thinking about some of these connections, some of the significance of the practice of dressing up, in light of the Parsha's emphasis on the Kohanim's clothing, whether that's an ideal or whether that's a concession to our lowly human state, I thought was an interesting tie-in. Final thoughts or questions?
Yes, I want to apologize for coming in and out and so on. We have a friend in the emergency room and we're trying to help his wife. And
Oy.
tonight there is Arthur and Joshua are going for a minion for Jerry Rotman, who lost his mother. That's Elisheva's grandmother. And so that's a lot of back and forth. And I didn't hear everything that went on, but I did want to bring up one thing. As you know, the article that was published in the Jewish Times about our shul, and one of the things that I did manage to get in there was that the reason that we do beating that we do, and it's related also to the clothing, is specifically for dignity, to enhance dignity.
Beautiful.
And that is not a word. I don't know. I didn't find it in what you have here. So I just wanted to offer the insight of the Rebbe about it, because for dignity and splendor is how he translates those two words. Kavod is the dignity. It is a characteristic of Malchus, a recognition of sovereignty, of dignity. And so the clothing that is not dignified, no matter how expensive it is, kind of misses the point, you know?
Yeah.
There is a category, a sense of being Bas Melech or Ben Melech. We are children. We are royal children, or we know we're not too far along in the process, and so we're like little ones in some ways, but still that dignity is very important and palpable. There are many things written about the clothing, for example, of Queen Elizabeth II, who tried her very best to always have very dignified suits and hats. They weren't ostentatious, but they were dignified.
Yeah.
And how important that is. And the other thing is about the priesthood of Moshe. The Rebbe says that he was at such a level, he was already a priest and beyond it. So he didn't need to establish his identity that way. But a Kohen does need, they needed for the Kohanim to wear something different than the rest to show that they were set apart. So it is a part of holiness that enters into it. And the word Tiferet, the splendor, is a way of harmonizing. That's true. All of those inner character traits, so that a person is sort of internally very well balanced. I just wanted to throw some of those ideas in because I didn't hear the other part, and I'm sorry if I've said something.
And Refuah Shlema to your friend, Refuah Shlema.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think we'll call it an evening. As I said, next week, no Parsha Shir. We'll be in Motzei Purim, or Purim, post party glow or whatever. The party can continue. It'll be Shushan Purim. So we will pick up again in 2 weeks. Again, please make every effort to be in shul on Shabbos to hear Parshat Zachor read, to come together, to daven together, to learn together, and see you in shul Monday evening. The full schedule is posted on the website. Come in costume. don't come in costume. Either way, it will be a dignified and glorious celebration of Purim, and look forward to seeing everyone there.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank
Laila
you.
Tov.
I was